Hello and welcome to Natural Balance. I'm your co-host, Mia Sines, and with me in this episode is my co-host and your co-host, Debbie Murad. And before I welcome her on, I want to share some amazing things about her. She is a therapist in private practice. She's a professor at USC, pretty exciting, and she's also a coach. She helps people move through the traumas and a whole bunch of amazing things that she's going to share with us. I met Debbie about a year and a half ago, and together we're creating this Natural Balance Center so that we can help support people in the masses on recovery and many different levels. So welcome, Debbie. It's nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. Would you share a little bit more about yourself and or your journey that you'd like the audience to know?
Oh, thank you, Mia. Yes, I'd love to. One of my passions is seeing people heal from trauma and then moving into the coaching world through spending time in nature. I love being in nature. It is a very important part of my life. And so, as you know, recently I started including that in my therapy practice and now the coaching practice. And I find that it just speeds healing and change, positive change for people.
Wonderful.
Brought me here is really my area of expertise is trauma and addiction. And I had to find balance in, working with that with my clients. And that really led me to you.
Yes, wonderful. And it's fabulous because what we're creating here with Natural Balance is an actual center that we have plans to go live at the end of the summer. So of 2018. So look for more support coming from us, and it's really great. So I just love Debbie, and so I'm so glad that we're partnering on this. It's really fabulous. Okay, so let's get into your work here. Okay. I know that you're going to share a lot of stuff, but one thing that I have to say, we know that therapists do counseling and things like that, and some do it on a spiritual tone, some do it on a regular tone. But one thing that I really love that you do with people is you bring people back into nature. I got to get into this part of it because it's really super cool. You love hiking and you love to have people absorb this. Can you share with us about your natural weekend hikes and stuff, and also the elements that it supports people with?
Okay, sure. I'd love to. So I fell into hiking actually after I just got into the field and I was young. And, when we work with trauma, I know this now that we are actually really vulnerable to vicarious trauma. Mm-hmm. And so what I naturally gravitated to was natural landscapes. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, Mother Earth is very healing. Mm-hmm. So I just hiked in order to find my own sense of balance and grounding. Mm-hmm. And as part of trauma healing, we all that do this work teach grounding. And one thing led to another, and adding nature walks or hiking as part of a therapeutic process just made the most sense. And so it's like a little retreat. If I'm hiking on my own for self-care, it's a retreat. Working with clients is how can we make life feel like a retreat? And we go out into nature, and once we're exposed to the elements, everything changes. Because in order to heal, we have to do something different, and we have to do it in the body in the present moment. And nature makes that automatic. You'll see the birds flying, the sun is shining. I live in the big city too, like you, and I'm very, very blessed and fortunate to live on the coast. So I have to look at the ocean every day, and I have to look at the hills. And that just does something. I get to.
Yes.
I get to.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I find trails that aren't difficult. I mean, they can be, but it's really about how the landscape speaks to me and speaks to others.
That's lovely. And those little special surprises when you turn a corner and there's a little waterfall or something is just the added bonus, isn't it?
It is. And every day is a different day. If we've had a good wet winter, we've got running water, and which is just magical here because we don't always have that.
Right, right.
And then, you know, we never know what's going to be in bloom, or a little bunny crosses my path and it's okay.
So beautiful. Yes. Will you share with us a little bit about more about your coaching and also about your therapy practice, as far as, yes, we know you deal with trauma, but what are some of the ways that you help move people through that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. So, how this evolved is I really saw it as a continuation of therapy. So, people start off wanting to heal, and therapy is about addressing pain that has probably been not dealt with for most of their lives. And part of addressing that therapeutically really is very personal. I mean, there are many interventions that could work, but what works for you might not work for me. So I've learned to really tailor services by getting to know the person I'm working with pretty quickly. And, you know, I can see by an assessment, where are the gaps? So something is not being addressed, some pain, and then we work together to address the pain, to fill that emptiness, you know, that might be through healing relationships that are unhealthy. I do a lot with very unhealthy, abusive relationships. It might be addressing the addiction and working on healthy coping skills versus unhealthy coping skills, which is basically what addiction is. It's masking a pain. Let's work through the pain. And what I found in working with people in a great deal of pain is that, and I know this is your expertise, there's a lot of self-hate, there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of criticism. And so in order to move somebody into the coaching arena, they have to get in touch with the self-hate and learn some compassion, right? And then self-love is possible. But when I first start working with people, the self-hate, it can sometimes be palpable. And so we have to start with, well, how about self-like? And sometimes that's tolerable. So it's very painful. And so slowly, with baby steps, we get to a place of self-care. And then, you know, the goal is to work towards self-love by, you know, looking at your relationships. Are the relationships nurturing you? And what people find as they love themselves more is that some relationships are really draining. And the relationships that are very mutual, very healthy, they want to spend more time. So sometimes it means losing people. So it might be, you know, looking at quality versus quantity, right, in terms of friendships. Some people might have an area that they're absolutely neglecting. They don't feel deserving. And being undeserving, it's, you know, a core trauma wounding is feeling I'm not good enough as an artist or as a writer, so I will not do this. I don't deserve it. So that starts to emerge pretty quickly. So once we move into coaching, it's how can you start writing and not judge the writing, you know, as a way of expression, because there's an artist within all of us. How do we express ourselves? For me, I love programs, developing programs that help others. But some people need to write. They need to write. You know, if we don't express our art, we're filled with anxiety. We're filled with panic. And once people start to nurture this, the panic goes away. I've worked with a lot of panic disorders, which is completely debilitating. And people begin to thrive, and it's beautiful to be there. And I'm not doing this. I'm just creating a safe space, supporting people. And again, this has something has to change in order for this to happen. So there are thoughts, our belief systems, and the movement piece, I believe, creates a little bit more momentum. Because our thoughts can be so painful and moving so fast on that hamster wheel of self-doubt, self-criticism. When we move outside and we're listening to the birds and we're smelling the roses, things change pretty dramatically, pretty quickly. You know? And so the goal is really to make that part of the routine. And how that works, of course, is different for everybody. Some people just need to sit in a natural landscape and feel the elements. Okay. feel the cool wind or the hot sun, watch the breeze blow the leaves on the tree, look at the ocean. The pebbly beaches are a lot of fun because it's so loud, and the waves come in and the pebbles move back and forth. It's very meditative. So I love to meditate. For some people, meditation is best outside, watching the waves come in and go, and we can use that as part of a healing meditation.
Yeah. That's pretty fabulous because the outdoor, like you were saying, the ocean. So if you just sit at your lake or your ocean, even your stream, and just watch it flow, right? And then it takes you into that space. I love that.
Yeah. And you listen to it. Listen to the sounds. We have so much noise in the city, and we're inundated with so much noise that if we can be in a natural space and just listen to the sounds of nature, it's very soothing. And it doesn't have to be for very long, 15 minutes. We need at least 15 minutes. As you would say, 15 minutes is better than none. Right. And it's actually the slow steps. Sometimes people get really excited about a new routine and they want to work out and they're doing it 7 days a week for 2 hours a day. Yeah. And I feel burnt out just listening to that.
Yeah, exactly. I did too when you were saying that. And then I'm thinking about my life, oh yeah, I was just going to do that myself.
Yeah. And, maybe that's a good idea to get you started on a new habit. But what I know about habit change, because that's what we're talking about, and we can break it down very simply, is that you have to think 6 months to a year in advance, how am I going to maintain this new habit? Right. And so for most people, 3 days a week for 45 minutes is more reasonable. And can you be okay with that? And some weeks it might be twice a week, and some weeks 5 days a week, and that's awesome. Yeah. So the small changes work. They're incremental. They're small baby steps. We enjoy them in the moment, and they build lasting changes. And these small steps that we're working on are actually very exciting, because when we work towards a goal, the fact that we're working towards a goal makes us feel better, whether we achieve it or not. Eventually we will. Right? Yeah. So that's how the coaching works. And again, it's very, very individual and very personal. I mean, the focus could be on self-reflection, because I know the more we know about ourselves, the more we grow, the more aware we are of areas that need nurturing. So we add the nurturing, we add the self-care. But the self-reflection process that's where the coach comes in, because we get to serve it as mirrors to help people to understand who they are and how they can best take care of themselves. So not everybody's going to be on the hiking trails or looking at the ocean. They might, if you have a garden, that's great, or a nice park with a duck pond. Those are so fun. I mean, they're there for the kids, but we enjoy them too, right? Yeah. So we could just sit and go on a slow meditative walk and, again, look at the green grass, look at the trees, listen to the birds.
Yeah. And there's no excuse. We can do this in the city. Most places have, even if it's just a patch of grass somewhere, as long as you're looking and absorbing, I call it absorbing, focusing in that moment and then looking up at the trees, you're going to have some nature at least. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
The goal is to have a lot of it because we're organic and that's organic. But if you can't, even a little bit is supportive. I love these. You're even more masterful than I remember. It's awesome. So can you share with us some kind of tools for a lot of what you talked about, like the core trauma and stuff is sounds like the saboteur coming out. So how can we shift that aspect of that talk, that self-talk that comes to us that's negative?
Oh, the self-talk. That's like moving mountains, isn't it? So that's a huge step. So first, we need to be aware that what we're doing is self-talk. And we have to understand the nature of it. So a lot of the self-talk tends to be very critical with trauma. So I will very quickly actually start reflecting that back. And what I might see is that if somebody, engages in behavior that they don't like about themselves, like with trauma, oftentimes the addiction comes with it as a form of coping. Let's say, binge eating is a very common one. And then it becomes, oh, it was so bad, and I ate this, and then I had a drink, and then I felt terrible, and then, spiraled
cycle.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the self-talk then is connected to the behavior. And so then we can look at how could you be kinder to yourself, and what would happen if you were. And what if we look at what you were feeding was the pain of remembering a very, very painful event, because you were speaking to a friend and the memory emerged when the friend talked about her relationship. The traumatic event had to do with an abusive relationship. And that awareness, first of all, helps stop the self-talk, the negative self-talk, and a belief, well, what would it be like if you had self-compassion instead of self-criticism, which is very frightening for people in the beginning. Let's try it out. Let's take a few deep breaths before we do that. Not deep breaths, really slow breaths, because even deep breathing could be very frightening. And then let's look at some other things that you have said to yourself, because that were positive, or that you can, if there isn't anything in the past, that you can try on instead and see what happens with that. So we'll practice some of the self-talk, and in a very simple way, because it can be overwhelming. Oh, I got to change all my thoughts. Well, we can't change all of our thoughts.
Right. Especially not at once.
No, but we can change the core thoughts. But first we have to understand that they're there, and we'll work on a replacement thought. The replacement thought right then and there is, I'm doing the best that I can. And so I had a drink. I'm fine. I will get back on the bandwagon and not, get back on the wagon, I should say. And it doesn't mean that I binge, and eat the whole box of cookies or the whole 6-pack or drink the whole 6-pack or what have you, right? That I was taking care of myself, I was in pain, and now I'll use some of my other tools to take care of myself, okay? And so a few slow breaths, a slight shift, and then again, noticing the pattern, the triggers of what triggers the pain, that triggers the negative self-talk, and what new behaviors could be introduced. And honestly, we can change the inner chatter. What helps is doing something different while changing the thoughts. So again, that's where some of the outdoor grounding or the walking or the hiking comes in, is that one way to stop it, we can say stop the thoughts, like thought stopping. We do that, it works. But getting outside of the environment that's producing that negative chatter, because it could be that person was really isolated and needed to get outside, get some sunshine. And then it's a little bit easier to change the thoughts.
I'm curious, since this is your field, when we're out in nature and we're changing those thoughts, when we're back inside, when it's not as maybe glorious or stimulating, and those thoughts come, if we change the verbiage back to what we felt outside, does it bring in the image of the outdoors? Because I guess what I'm asking is, we can pull in, right, the support of the outdoors, even indoors. It's a trigger in our brain that we can do. So how would somebody who rarely gets to go outside, whether they're not well enough or whether they just don't live in the country or a place that they can, how can they how would you suggest them bringing nature indoors to them, or setting these trigger patterns, positive ones, of course, that when they touch or feel something, they are starting to embrace how great life really can be. They're doing the more positive stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think we all, regardless of our geography or ability, need to learn how to ground ourselves. So we can be grounded inside, and so for example, when panic starts to bubble up and the thoughts are racing, what we would do before that happens is practice, like in a session, how to ground yourself. So grounding happens in your mind. It can happen in your mind. You can take yourself outside, as I described, but you can imagine a safe place in nature. And that's something that we actually talk about is let's describe a safe place, so that once you start to get stressed out in your thought process and more critical than usual, you can go to that mental image of a safe place. And again, that's very personal, that safe place. And then being physically grounded in your home environment is possible too. Are there plants in the home? You could look at the physical structure of your home. That's grounding. And then you talk yourself through what you're seeing. The reason we do that is because it gets us into the here and now. Because the negative self-talk is about the future or the past. Not in the, that's what trauma does. It gets us out of the body and out of the present moment. So, which can feel very frightening. So how do we get in the present moment? We remind ourselves that we're safe. The goal is to be physically, emotionally, spiritually safe, and what's required to make that happen. And we look out the window. We look at our desks. We feel it. We put our feet on the ground. If you can do that. So those are some ways to get grounded. As far as bringing nature in, well, these days with the internet, we can bring anything in. And so I do work with some people, because the residue of trauma is the more complex it was in childhood, the more health problems there tends to be in later adulthood. So when I work with some older adults, what they might do is they bring in an image of the ocean just to feel more soothed. So part of it is just soothing yourself, taking a break from the mental chatter, looking at a soothing image of the ocean or the mountains, and just spending a little time with yourself, nurturing yourself. So it's a mini retreat.
Yeah, I love that. Would you like to share what your free gift is?
So my free gift is a 10-minute assessment where we can talk and figure out what it is that would help you find some balance in your life.
Wonderful. And I suggest you guys hop on that, because that's pretty nice. From Debbie. Wonderful. What else would you like to leave us with before we sign off?
I would just like to leave everybody with a sense of hope that we can all find what provides us with balance and nurturance.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for everything that you shared and said. I'm loving it over here. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Mia.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you in another episode of Natural Balance.